Chapter 8. For a week, I barely saw Hassan. I woke up to find toasted bread, brewed tea, and a boiled egg already on the kitchen table. My clothes for the day were ironed and folded, left on the cane seat chair in the foyer, where Hassan usually did his ironing. He used to wait for me to sit at the breakfast table before he started ironing. That way we could talk. Used to sing, too, over the hissing of the iron, sang old Hazara songs about tulip fields. Now only the folded clothes greeted me. That and a breakfast I hardly finished anymore. One overcast morning, as I was pushing the boiled egg around on my plate, Ali walked in, cradling a pile of chopped wood. I asked him where Hassan was. He went back to sleep, Ali said, kneeling before the stove. He pulled the little square door open. Would Hassan be able to play today? Ali paused with a log in his hand. A worried look crossed his face. Lately, it seems all he wants to do is sleep. He does his chores, I see to that, but then he just wants to crawl under his blanket. Can I ask you something? If you have to. After that kite tournament, he came home a little bloodied and his shirt was torn. I asked him what had happened and he said it was nothing, that he'd gotten into a little scuffle with some kids over the kite. I didn't say anything, just kept pushing the egg around on my plate. Did something happen to him, Amir Aga? Something he's not telling me? I shrugged. How should I know? You would tell me, nay? Inshallah, you would tell me if something had happened? Like I said, how should I know what's wrong with him? I snapped. Maybe he's sick. People get sick all the time, Ali. Now, am I going to freeze to death or are you planning on lighting the stove today? And then there's space, and I'm not sure if we've talked about space, but as I would guess you know, space means time passes, and in this case, it's later that night. So let's move on. That night, I asked Baba if we could go to Jalalabad on Friday. He was rocking on the leather swivel chair behind his desk, reading a newspaper. He put it down, took off the reading glasses I disliked so much. Baba wasn't old, not at all, and he had lots of years left to live, so why did he have to wear those stupid glasses? And I want to stop there and say, remember that we've been talking about that reoccurring symbol of the eyes? I think it's interesting here that the glasses are something that Amir doesn't like. I'm thinking that maybe they shield his eyes. And again, remember, the eyes are the window to a soul. So it's somehow, maybe he's thinking those glasses shield him from Baba or keep him distanced from Baba, something like that. So I would just make a note of that. Why not, he said. Lately, Baba agreed to everything I asked. Not only that, just 2 nights before, he'd asked me if I wanted to see El Cid with Charlton Heston at Cinema Ariana. Do you want to ask Hassan to come along to Jalalabad? Why did Baba have to spoil it like that? He's Maurice, I said, not feeling well. Really? Baba stopped rocking in his chair. What's wrong with him? I gave a shrug and sank in the sofa by the fireplace. He's got a cold or something. Ali says he's sleeping it off. I haven't seen much of Hassan the last few days, Baba said. That's all it is then, a cold? I couldn't help hating the way his brow furrowed with worry. Just a cold. So are we going Friday, Baba? Yes, Baba said, pushing away from the desk. Too bad about Hassan. I thought you might have had more fun if he came. Well, the 2 of us can have fun together, I said. Baba smiled, winked. Dress warm, he said. It should have been just the 2 of us. That was the way I wanted it. But by Wednesday night, Baba had managed to invite another 24 people. He called his cousin Homayun. He was actually Baba's second cousin, and mentioned he was going to Jalalabad on Friday, and Homayun, who had studied engineering in France and had a house in Jalalabad, said he'd love to have everyone over. He'd bring the kids, his 2 wives, and, while he was at it, cousin Shafika and her family were visiting from Herat. Maybe she'd like to tag along. And since she was staying with cousin Nader in Kabul, his family would have to be invited as well, even though Homayun and Nader had a bit of a feud going, and if Nadir was invited, surely his brother Farouk had to be asked too, or his feelings would be hurt and he might not invite them to his daughter's wedding next month. And we filled 3 vans. I rode with Baba, Rahim Khan, Kaka Homayun, and Baba taught me at a young age to call any older male Kaka or uncle, or any older female Kala or aunt. Kaka Homayun's 2 wives rode with us too, the pinch-faced older one with the warts on her hands, and the younger one who always smelled of perfume and danced with her eyes close, as did Kaka Homayun's twin girls. I sat in the back row, car sick and dizzy, sandwiched between the 7-year-old twins who kept reaching over my lap to slap at each other. The road to Jalalabad is a 2-hour trek through mountain roads winding along a steep drop, and my stomach lurched with each hairpin turn. Everyone in the van was talking loudly and at the same time nearly shrieking, which is how Afghans talk. I asked one of the twins, Fazila or Karima, I could never tell which was which, if she'd trade her window seat with me so I could get fresh air on account of my car sickness. She stuck her tongue out and said no. I told her that was fine, but I couldn't be held accountable for vomiting on her new dress. A minute later, I was leaning out the window. I watched the cratered road rise and fall, whirl its tail around the mountainside, counted the multicolored trucks packed with squatting men lumbering past. I tried closing my eyes, letting the wind slap at my cheeks, opened my mouth to swallow the clean air. I still didn't feel better. A finger poked me in the side. It was Fazila Karima, and he's doing that because he can't remember which one is which, so one of those 2 is what that means when he does the Fazila/Karima. What? I said. I was just telling everyone about the tournament, Baba said from behind the wheel. Kaka Homayun and his wives were smiling at me from the middle row of seats. There must have been 100 kites in the sky that day, Baba said. Is that about right, Amir? I guess so, I mumbled. 100 kites, Homayun Jan. No laugh. And the only one still flying at the end of the day was Amir's. He has the last kite at home, a beautiful blue kite. Hassan and Amir ran it together. Congratulations, Kaka Homayun said. His first wife, the one with the warts, clapped her hands. Wah wah, Amir Jan. We're all so proud of you, she said. The younger wife joined in. Then they were all clapping, yelping their praises, telling me how proud I'd made them all. Only Rahim Khan, sitting in the passenger seat next to Baba, was silent. He was looking at me in an odd way. Please pull over, Baba, I said. What? Getting sick, I muttered, leaning across the seat, pressing against Kaka Homayun's daughters. Fazila Karima's face twisted. Pull over, Kaka! His face is yellow. I don't want him throwing up on my new dress, she squealed. Baba began to pull over, but I didn't make it. A few minutes later, I was sitting on a rock on the side of the road as they aired out the van. Baba was smoking with Kaka Homayun, who was telling Fazila Karima to stop crying. He'd buy her another dress in Jalalabad. I closed my eyes, turned my face to the sun. Little shapes formed behind my eyelids, like hands playing shadows on the wall. They twisted, merged, formed a single image. Hassan's brown corduroy pants, discarded on a pile of old bricks in the alley. Kaka Homayun's white 2-story house in Jalalabad had a balcony overlooking a large walled garden with apple and persimmon trees. There were hedges that in the summer the gardener shaped like animals, and a swimming pool with emerald-colored tiles. I sat on the edge of the pool, empty save for a layer of slushy snow at the bottom, feet dangling in. Kaka Homyun's kids were playing hide-and-seek at the other end of the yard. The women were cooking, and I could smell onions frying already. Could hear the f-f of a pressure cooker. Music, laughter. Baba, Reem Khan, Kaka Homyun, and Kaka Nadir were sitting on the balcony, smoking. Kaka Homyun was telling them he'd brought the projector along to show his slides of France. 10 years since he'd returned from Paris, and he was still showing those stupid slides. It shouldn't have felt this way. Baba and I were finally friends. We'd gone to the zoo a few days before, seen Marjan the lion, and I had hurled a pebble at the bear when no one was watching. We'd gone on Dudgoka's kebab house, gone to Dudgoka's kebab house afterward, across from the cinema park, had lamb kebab with freshly baked naan from the tandoor. Baba told me stories of his travels to India and Russia, the people he had met, like the armless, legless couple in Bombay who'd been married 47 years and raised 11 children. That should have been fun, spending a day like that with Baba, hearing his stories. I finally had what I'd wanted all those years, except now that I had it, I felt as empty as this unkempt pool I was dangling my legs into. And I would mark that down, the except now that I had it, I felt as empty. I think that that's important to note, that he's got everything he wants and now it's not fulfilling him. The wives and daughters served dinner, rice, kafta, and chicken kurma at sundown. We dined the traditional way, sitting on cushions around the room, tablecloths spread on the floor, eating with our hands in groups of 4 or 5 from common platters. I wasn't hungry, but sat down to eat anyway with Baba, Kaka Farouk, and Kaka Homyun's 2 boys. Baba, who'd had a few scotches before dinner, was still ranting about the kite tournament, how I'd outlasted them all, how I'd come home with the last kite. His booming voice dominated the room. People raised their heads from their platters, called out their congratulations. Kaka Farouk patted my back with his clean hand. I felt like sticking a knife in my eye. Later, well past midnight, after a few hours of poker between Baba and his cousins, the men lay down to sleep on parallel mattresses in the same room where we'd dined. The women went upstairs. An hour later, I still couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning as my relatives grunted, sighed, and snored in their sleep. I sat up. A wedge of moonlight streamed through the window. I watched Hassan get raped. I said to no one. Baba stirred in his sleep. Kaka Homyun grunted. A part of me was hoping someone would wake up and hear, so I wouldn't have to live with this lie anymore. But no one woke up, and in the silence that followed, I understood the nature of my new curse. I was going to get away with it. I thought about Hassan's dream, the one about us swimming in the lake. "There is no monster," he'd said, "just water." Except he'd been wrong about that. There was a monster in the lake. It had grabbed Hassan by the ankles, dragged him to the murky bottom. I was that monster. That was the night I became an insomniac. Insomniac means a person who can't sleep. So I think that what he saw in the alley is certainly impacting him in ways he had not predicted. I didn't speak to Hassan until the middle of the next week. I had just half eaten my lunch and Hassan was doing the dishes. I was walking upstairs, going to my room, when Hassan asked if I wanted to hike up the hill. I said I was tired. Hassan looked tired too. He'd lost weight and gray circles had formed under his puffed up eyes. But when he asked again, I reluctantly agreed. We trekked up the hill, our boots squishing in the muddy snow. Neither one of us said anything. We sat under our pomegranate tree, and I knew I'd made a mistake. I shouldn't have come up the hill. The words I'd carved on the tree trunk with Ali's kitchen knife, Amir and Hassan, the sultans of Kabul, I couldn't stand looking at them now. He asked me to read to him from the Shahnameh, and I told him I'd changed my mind, told him I just wanted to go back to my room. He looked away and shrugged. We walked back down the way we'd come up, in silence. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait for spring. So spring, we're going to talk about archetypes next week, but spring is one of those archetypes, and it is the archetype of renewal, rebirth, and winter is the archetype of death and nothingness. So he's in winter and he feels nothingness, and that's how archetypes work. They work to illuminate some aspect of the novel, and in this case, Amir's own guilt is forcing him into a death-like state, and so he wants to be reborn and to feel again, and that's why he says he's waiting for spring. My memory of the rest of that winter of 1975 is pretty hazy. I remember I was fairly happy when Baba was home. We'd eat together, go to see a film, visit Kaka Homayun or Kaka Farouk. Sometimes Rahim Khan came over, and Baba let me sit in his study and sip tea with them. He'd even have me read him some of my stories. It was good, and I even believed it would last. And Baba believed it too, I think. We both should have known better. For at least a few months after the kite tournament, Baba and I immersed ourselves in a sweet illusion, saw each other in a way that we never had before. We'd actually deceived ourselves into thinking that a toy made of tissue paper, glue, and bamboo could somehow close the chasm between us. And a chasm is just a big space. And basically what he's saying is that there is distance and space between the two of them, but for a couple of months they kind of fool each other into thinking that they're the same because now they've both won a kite tournament and things like that. All right, moving on. But when Baba was out, and he was out a lot, I closed myself in my room. I read a book every couple of days, wrote stories, learned to draw horses. I'd hear Hassan shuffling around the kitchen in the morning, hear the clinking of silverware, the whistle of the teapot. I'd wait to hear the door shut, and only then I would walk down to eat. On my calendar, I circled the date of the first day of school and began a countdown. To my dismay, Hassan kept trying to rekindle things between us. I remember the last time. I was in my room, reading an abbreviated Farsi translation of Ivanhoe, when he knocked on my door. "What is it?" "I'm going to the baker to buy naan," he said from the other side. "I was wondering if you wanted to come along." "I think I'm just going to read," I said, rubbing my temples. Lately, every time Hassan was around, I was getting a headache. "It's a sunny day," he said. "I can see that." "Might be fun to go for a walk." "You go." "I wish you'd come along," he said. Paused. Something thumped against the door, maybe his forehead. "I don't know what I've done, Amir Aga. I wish you'd tell me. I don't know why we don't play anymore." "You haven't done anything, Hassan. Just go." "You can tell me. I'll stop doing it." I buried my head in my lap, squeezed my temples with my knees like a vice. "I'll tell you what I want you to stop doing," I said. Eyes pressed shut. "Anything." "I want you to stop harassing me. I want you to go away," I snapped. I wished he would give it right back to me, break the door open and tell me off. It would have made things easier, better. But he didn't do anything like that, and when I opened the door minutes later, he wasn't there. I fell on my bed, buried my head under the pillow, and cried. I think that's so sad that this 12-year-old boy is so devastated by what he chose not to do that now he's pushing the victim away even further, and instead of providing comfort for his friend, He's just making it worse. It just makes me really sad. All right, moving on. Hassan milled about the periphery of my life after that. I like that line. Hassan milled about the periphery of my life after that. It means to mill about means to move around, and the periphery of my life means the outer edges. So it means they never really connected after that. I made sure our paths crossed as little as possible, planned my day that way. Because when he was around, the oxygen seeped out of the room. My chest tightened and I couldn't draw enough air. I'd stand there, gasping in my own little airless bubble of atmosphere. But even when he wasn't around, he was. He was there in the hand-washed and ironed clothes on the cane seat chair, in the warm slippers left outside my door, in the wood already burning in the stove when I came down for breakfast. Everywhere I turned, I saw signs of his loyalty, his goddamn unwavering loyalty. Early that spring, a few days before the new school year started, Baba and I were planting tulips in the garden. Most of the snow had melted and the hills in the north were already dotted with patches of green grass. It was a cool, gray morning, and Baba was squatting next to me, digging the soil and planting the bulbs I handed to him. He was telling me how most people thought it was better to plant tulips in the fall, and how that wasn't true. When I came right out and said it, "Baba, have you ever thought about getting new servants?" Yikes. He dropped the tulip bulb and buried the trowel in the dirt. He took off his gardening gloves. I'd startled him. "Gee, what did you say?" "I was just wondering, that's all." "Why would I ever want to do that?" Baba said curtly. "You wouldn't, I guess. It was just a question," I said, my voice fading to a murmur. I was already sorry I'd said it. "Is this about you and Hassan? I know there's something going on between you two, but whatever it is, you have to deal with it, not me. I'm staying out of it." "I'm sorry, Baba." He put on his gloves again. "I grew up with Ali," he said, through clenched teeth. "My father took him in. He loved Ali like his own son. 40 years Ali's been with my family. 40 goddamn years. And you think I'm just going to throw him out?" He turned to me now, his face as red as a tulip. "I have never laid a hand on you, Amir, but you ever say that again?" He looked away, shaking his head. "You bring me shame. And Hassan's not going anywhere. Do you understand?" I looked down and picked up a fistful of cool soil, let it pour between my fingers. "I said, do you understand?" Baba roared. I flinched. "Yes, Baba." "Hassan's not going anywhere," Baba snapped. He dug a new hole with the trowel, striking the dirt harder than he had to. "He's staying right here with us, where he belongs. This is his home, and we're his family. Don't you ever ask me that question again." "I won't, Baba. I'm sorry." We planted the rest of the tulips in silence. So I guess that's kind of the end of Baba and Amir's sort of closeness. I was relieved when school started that next week. Students with new notebooks and sharpened pencils in hand ambled about the courtyard, kicking up dust, chatting in groups, waiting for the class captain's whistles. Baba drove down the dirt lane that led to the entrance. The school was an old 2-story building with broken windows and dim cobblestone hallways, patches of its original dull yellow paint still showing between sloughing chunks of plaster. Most of the boys walked to school, and Baba's black Mustang drew more than one envious look. I should have been beaming with pride when he dropped me off. The old me would have. But all I could muster was a mild form of embarrassment. That and emptiness. Baba drove away without saying goodbye. I want to stop here on page 90 and talk about that idea of emptiness. I feel like the author has really showed us that emptiness in the last couple of pages. And I think that that's contributing to this overall message we're supposed to be getting. Something about how when you do something that's so horrific, it it kind of robs you of your insides. It robs you of your character, your integrity. It kind of robs you of who you are. It makes you somebody else. So I wanted to point that out, that you should be making note of all this emptiness stuff. I bypassed the customary comparing of kite fighting scars and stood in line. The bell rang and we marched to our assigned class, filed in pairs. I sat in the back row. As the Farsi teacher handed out our textbooks, I prayed for a heavy load of homework. School gave me an excuse to stay in my room for long hours. And for a while, it took my mind off what had happened that winter, what I had let happen. For a few weeks, I preoccupied myself with gravity and momentum, atoms and cells, the Anglo-Afghan wars, instead of thinking about Hassan and what had happened to him. But always, my mind returned to the alley, to Hassan's brown corduroy pants lying on the bricks, to the droplets of blood staining the snow dark red, almost black. One sluggish, hazy afternoon early that summer, I asked Hassan to go up the hill with me. Told him I wanted to read him a new story I'd written. He was hanging clothes to dry in the yard, and I saw his eagerness in the harried way he finished his job. We climbed the hill, making small talk. He asked about school, what I was learning, and I talked about my teachers, especially the mean math teacher who punished talkative students by sticking a metal rod between their fingers and then squeezing them together. Hassan winced at that, said he hoped I'd never have to experience it. I said I'd been lucky so far, knowing that luck had nothing to do with it. I had done my share of talking in class too, but my father was rich and everyone knew him, so I was spared the metal rod treatment. We sat against the low cemetery wall under the shade thrown by the pomegranate tree. In another month or two, crops of scorched yellow weeds would blanket the hillside, but that year the spring showers had lasted longer than usual, nudging their way into early summer, and the grass was still green, peppered with tangles of wildflowers. Below us, Wazir Akbar Khan's white-walled, flat-topped house gleamed in the sunshine, the laundry hanging on clotheslines in their yards, stirred by the breeze to dance like butterflies. We had picked a dozen pomegranates from the tree. I unfolded the story I'd brought along, turned to the first page, then put it down. I stood up and picked up an overripe pomegranate that had fallen to the ground. "What would you do if I hit you with this?" I said, tossing the fruit up and down. Hassan's smile wilted. He looked older than I'd remembered. No, not older. Old? Was that possible? Lines had etched into his tanned face, and creases framed his eyes, his mouth. I might as well have taken a knife and carved those lines myself. "What would you do?" I repeated. The color fell from his face. Next to him, the stapled pages of the story I'd promised to read him fluttered in the breeze. I hurled the pomegranate at him. It struck him in the chest, exploded in a spray of red pulp. Hassan's cry was pregnant with surprise and pain. "Hit me back!" I snapped. Hassan looked from the stain on his chest to me. "Get up! Hit me!" I said. Hassan did get up, but he just stood there, looking dazed, like a man dragged into the ocean by a riptide when, just a moment ago, he was enjoying a nice stroll on the beach. I hit him with another pomegranate, in the shoulder this time. The juice splattered his face. "Hit me back!" I spat. "Hit me back, goddamn you!" I wished he would. I wished he'd give me the punishment I craved, so maybe I'd finally sleep at night. Maybe then things could return to how they used to be between us. But Hassan did nothing as I pelted him again and again. "You're a coward," I said. "Nothing but a goddamn coward." I don't know how many times I hit him. All I know is that when I finally stopped, exhausted and panting, Hassan was smeared in red like he'd been shot by a firing squad. I fell to my knees, tired, spent, frustrated. Then Hassan did pick up a pomegranate. He walked toward me. He opened it and crushed it against his own forehead. "There," he croaked, red dripping down his face like blood. "Are you satisfied? Do you feel better?" He turned around and started down the hill. I let the tears break free, rocked back and forth on my knees. What am I going to do with you, Hassan? What am I going to do with you? But by the time the tears dried up and I trudged down the hill, I knew the answer to that question. We're going to pause here so you can catch up on the next podcast for the last half of this chapter.